Welcome to this week's Iraq in 7 Minutes, which, by the way, we soon will be renaming. So if you have any suggestions, please leave it in the comments below. Uh, every week, this show is about discussing the top stories shaping Iraq today. And we'll always keep it brief, about 10 to 12 minutes. I'm Erik Gustafson.
And I'm Omar Nidawi.
Today, our main topic is Syria-Iraq regime change, particularly the implications of the fall of the Assad regime in Syria for Iraq in the region. So let's topple into it. Omar, Saddam's removal in 2003 was met with widespread anger and mourning by many in the Arab world, while Assad's removal today seems to be widely celebrated. What beyond sectarianism, which some have pointed to debatably, what factors do you think explain this stark difference in reactions?
That's a good question. I think there are three key differences that come to mind right away. And I think one of them is, while Saddam Hussein's atrocities against his people were rather hidden from public view back in the 1980s, Assad's atrocities against the Syrian people have been on display in HD for 13 years. And I think that makes a huge difference. There's also another big, I think, point to consider here is that there was the notion that Saddam Hussein was defending the Arab countries or the Arab world against Iranian encroachment. And in Assad's case, it's actually quite the opposite. He has been seen as Iran's puppet, as Iran's proxy. So quite a different, let's say, role that he has played in the geopolitical balance of power within the region. And I think the third point, which is kind of related to the previous two, really, and especially to the second one, is that many of the Arab governments that exist today have actually initially wanted Assad to be gone and have supported the Syrian opposition efforts to remove Assad from government. After that, of course, there was a period of rapprochement in more recent years and an effort to bring Assad back into the fold after it seemed that the Syrian revolution has stalled and that the front has stagnated. But I think, again, there's no love lost between Arab governments and the Assad regime. And I think these are probably the three key issues that the stark differences between Saddam and Assad.
So now getting on to the implications of the fall of the Assad regime for Iraq, starting with the positive implications. First, how might Assad's fall impact the Captagon trade, which his regime clearly supported?
Yeah, Captagon is one of those nasty drugs that have flooded parts of the region in recent years, and the Assad regime has been largely behind an industrial scale production of this drug, and it has been part of the big problem of drug trafficking and addiction in Iraq. Almost on a daily basis, you hear reports of security forces capturing millions of pills at the border, or kilos of pills of Captagon. And over the last few days, the Syrian people have discovered multiple large-scale facilities that the Assad regime was using to produce this nasty drug in huge quantities in order to build its narco empire and fund its operations. So the fact that these are going to be shut down, I think, is welcome news, not just for Iraq, but also for Jordan and other countries in the region. Big source of relief, I think.
Well, what about Iraq's role as a corridor for Iran's influence, the so-called Shia Crescent, stretching from Iran across Iraq, Syria to Lebanon with Hezbollah and even to Hamas in Gaza? Without Assad, does this shift the dynamics in favor of a reassertion of Iraqi sovereignty?
Potentially, yes. I think the fall of Assad's regime in such a quick and rapid and unexpected manner was a huge blow for Iran and its proxies that really, I think, is going to put them on their back foot for some time. It exposed the limitations of their power. It exposed a lot of the hypocrisy in their rhetoric, a lot of the falsehood of their rhetoric. And it's going to be up to the Iraqi government, the current one or the next one, to seize this opportunity and carve out some level of independence, some room for themselves to operate in independence from Iran's dictations.
So with Iran losing key allies, key ally in terms of the Assad regime in Syria, other allies elsewhere, how might this affect its proxies in Iraq? Could their confidence or operations be undermined? And I'm speaking of the Iran-backed militias in Iraq. How does this connect to Iraq's government strategy, especially considering Prime Minister Soudani's reversal on intervention in Syria?
Yeah, I mean, while it has been a big setback for Iran and for the Iran-backed militias who were talking all about uh, going to defend the regime in Syria, framing the fight as one of counterterrorism, really, and it's defending Iraq against this extremist threat. It's unclear how Iran is going to respond to this. There is a possibility that the loss of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Assad now in quick succession is going to prompt Iran to try and double down on its proxies in Iraq and try to increase their capabilities and increase their ability to act as power projection tools of Iran to compensate for the losses that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Assad have experienced. That's yet to be seen, but for the time being, I think they all look weak. They all are weakened by what's going on. It's going to take them time to recover, both in terms of physical power and in terms of reputation and morale. Again, it creates an opportunity for a government in Baghdad that, if it wants to be a little bit more independent than it has been, to take a stab at it.
And looking ahead, what would a stable, peaceful, and democratic Syria mean for Iraq's future? Could it help foster stronger ties and stability across the region?
Oh, absolutely. Iraq and Syria are almost like twins. They're very close culturally and in terms of their population and history, and there's so much room for cooperation and collaboration for good. If you look back at the last 20 so years, much of Iraq's problems originated or were nurtured by Syria, by the Assad regime, which was very fearful of the idea of a democratic and pluralistic Iraq emerging next door. So for a democratic, pluralistic, and peaceful Syria to emerge, I think that can be a huge win for Iraq. And there's so much room for cooperation on trade, on transportation, on energy, on water, and in diplomatic ways to rebalance the geopolitics of the region in a positive way for both countries. So it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, let's hope for that. Finally, with around 300,000 Syrian refugees currently in Iraq, mostly in the Kurdistan region, do you think Assad's fall will lead to significant refugee returns?
So we haven't seen reports of Syrian refugees returning from Iraq to Syria, but we're seeing thousands of Syrian refugees return from Turkey to Syria. So that's a good indicator. There are, however, some concerns that are related to the hostility between Turkey and Turkish-backed rebels with the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are largely Syrian Kurdish forces. If hostilities erupt and continue in northeastern Syria because of that, then unfortunately we could see a new waves of migration or refugee movement from Syria to Iraq. Hopefully that won't be the case, and that people will be able to go home and rebuild their lives.
Thank you, Omar. Now let's quickly review some of the week's top developments from the latest Iraq report. Sharing the link right there. Iraq's leaders met on December 8th to discuss the implications of Assad's fall, emphasizing the importance of Syria's unity and the Syrian people's choices for peace and security. Iraq also reopened its embassy in Damascus. Over 2,000 Syrians, including many army personnel, fled to Iraq following Assad's collapse. Temporary housing has been set up in the border town of Al-Qaim. Iraq accelerated efforts to repatriate more than 18,000 Iraqi families from Syria's Al-Ful camp, prioritizing their return amid Syria's crisis. So that's it for this episode of what should we call it, Iraq in Focus. Let us know in the comments below. Also, just a reminder, we are in our year-end fundraising campaign. So please consider making a contribution. We'll include a donate link in the description. All donations will be matched dollar for dollar. That's all for this episode. For more news and analysis, visit us at enablingpeace.org. And if you value this content, please like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, Maslama.